Now live, this is Football at 4.
Last year, there was a gap because they won the Super Bowl between them and everybody, but I don't even think there is no gap. There's no gaps right now. And here's why I say that. Look at our team last year. Look at the Washington Commanders at the very beginning of the season. Everyone would say there was a massive gap between the Commanders and this team. Well, you look back on the season, you're like, oh, maybe there wasn't. They were actually pretty good.
That was Austin Eckler said that. What's this gap, he says? What's a gap between the Eagles and everybody else, specifically the Commanders? But is he right? Last year, we would have said, yeah, there's a gap between Philadelphia and Washington. Washington has been good in our lifetime for most of us. Now, our lifetime, when I was a kid, they were really good. But they haven't been good in a while. But his point is, look, if you were to judge us last year, of course there would be a gap. There's no gaps now. Everything's back to starting point. Geoff Mosher, a lot of people look at the Eagles and say there is a gap between them and Washington. But when you look around the NFC East and specifically Washington, is Austin Eckler fair to say that? And do you think Washington kind of looks at it like, hey, we're not getting enough credit, we're not getting enough respect this offseason?
It's a great topic of conversation, Mike. I'm glad you're bringing it up. We'll have even more of this pretty soon on Inside the Birds podcast, because we're starting next week our NFC East preview series. We do it with Greg Cosell. We break it up, all 4 teams. We dedicate an entire podcast to each team. And we did the Washington one. That'll be the 3rd of the 4th out. So you may have to wait a little bit. But the overall point on Washington is this. They're much deeper now than they used to be, especially on the offensive line, where they used to be abysmal. And now they have 2 guys on the bench who have started really big playoff games. So that's big for them. They have obviously a franchise quarterback that they hit on. They have some really good players, good coaching staff. However, what we think they lack, as when you compare them to the Eagles, is as much explosive playmakers. Now, maybe Deebo Samuel, sort of reverts to the form he had a couple of years ago when he was All-Pro. Terry McLaurin's a really good number 1 receiver, but you wouldn't put him in A.J. Brown or Justin Jefferson category, right? And then after that, they don't have somebody like Devontae Smith, and they certainly don't have a running back like Saquon. So where I think that they can overcome those deficiencies and make this a nice little fight, they don't really pound for pound measure up to the Eagles as far as being an explosive team that can just hit you with so many different weapons, but sometimes a guy like Jaden Daniels can be a neutralizer, Mike.
One of the areas where Washington really struggled last year was against the run. And you look at that, did they do enough this offseason to kind of close the gap? If that was one area where where the Eagles gashed them, do you look at Washington and say, well, they did address that by doing this, and that might be something to close the gap?
I feel like maybe do you have a spy cam in my office? Because you're asking me questions that are literally, I have on my website, on my laptop right now, a story I was reading.
Can you move 500,000? I'm going to get into your computer. That actually happened to a couple people I know that they fell for that scam.
Oh, well, I couldn't move that kind of money because I don't have it. So I'm not really worried about it. But there was a story that came out on Monday from John Kine. He does a great job, friend of mine, ESPN.com. Covers the Commanders, and if you read the lead, the lead of the story is basically an anecdote of the first play of the NFC Championship game, where kind of a screw up on run defense allowed Saquon Barkley to score on the first carry of the game. And then there's a quote from not only their defensive coordinator, but a member of the organization, an anonymous member, who said that Saquon has and what the Eagles did really has caused them this offseason to rethink how they're going to go about their run strategy. Now, they signed a guy like Javon Kinlaw, who played pretty well for the Jets last year after not really panning out for the Niners as a first-round pick. They added Dietrich Wise from New England. They've got Frankie Louvu, good linebacker. They've got a couple of good defensive tackles. So we'll see. I'm interested to see schematically, Mike, what they and other teams do after Barkley just went roughshod over everybody last year.
Yeah,
you gave the Chiefs 2 weeks to prepare, right? And they stopped Barkley, but they couldn't then stop the pass offense.
Right, and it's one thing, Austin Eckler, obviously a running back, plays offense, and you wonder, did they do a lot offensively to change the dynamics? You go back to that game last year, the first time they played, not the playoff game where the Eagles just absolutely, tore them apart. The first time they played, now Hurts got hurt in that game. but Washington did almost put up 30 points on the Eagle the second game. They put up over 30 points on the Eagle defense in that game. They scored 36 points in that game. So, Washington's offense is saying, hey, we could score on this team. We just had a bad day.
Well, I mean, I would hate to just cherry pick one game and say, because we did it that week, it's kind of like your great argument in the NBA season. Just because you lost a game in February where you played like crap doesn't mean in the playoffs the same thing is going to happen, right? And every once in a while in a 17-game season, you're going to not play your best. That was the number one ranked defense the Eagles finished with, and they just didn't play a great game that day. But in fairness, I mean, Jaden Daniels had some back-breaking runs. Obviously he had the bomb to Terry McLaurin in that game. They moved the ball so much better than they did in the first game when you could tell he was still bothered by that shoulder injury. But the point I'm making is just because it happened last year in one game doesn't mean it's going to be the new norm for the Commanders. Now, I think that their ability to what they did in the offensive line by getting Tunsil and drafting Josh Connerly out of Oregon will help them be more balanced and better offensively. Yeah, but they just, at the end of the day, they're putting so much pressure on Daniels because they really, to me, don't have a guy that you would consider a top 5 to 10 playmaker in the league. I like McLaurin. I like Debo.
So, I was going to say, so you're looking at the Debo addition and not saying that's as impactful as maybe Washington thinks it will be.
Well, Debo's if you get Debo from, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago when he was a first-team All-Pro, and that year, remember, he was carrying the ball, he's catching the ball, he's doing everything in an offense conducive to that, then yes. I mean, then the conversation changes. But this is several years later, and what did he have? He had he had 1,700 yards from scrimmage that year, Mike, 2021. So we are going to be 4 years removed from that. Yeah, and then he did have 1,100 yards and 12 touchdowns in 2023. So we're only going to be 2 seasons removed from that. But again, he's been injured before, and he's dynamic, but he's a high volume guy, right? Like,
what do you think of
he's not Justin Jefferson.
What do you think about him, though? I agree he's not Justin Jefferson, but what do you think about him as the other guy? Like, I don't know, Brandon Ayuk, was Ayuk the other guy? That's an interesting, is McLaurin the guy, and now Debo can kind of hang under the radar? Was it different than Ayuk in the dynamic in San Francisco and how they used him there?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. But the San Francisco offense is designed to get players open in space. Now, Cliff Kingsbury does a fantastic job of that as well. So I do think as long as he's healthy and can play 15 games, he's going to be a weapon for them. Will he be a 1,500-yard-like weapon? Will he be a number 1 or a 1A? I mean, you can get away with him being a 2 if McLaurin gave you like a 1,400-yard season, right? As opposed to maybe 1,000 or 1,100 yards. We'll see. I mean, McLaurin's a good player. I don't want to take anything away from him, but I just think this team is lacking a little bit more in the explosive category.
All right, well, what do you think of their trio? Because you got McLaurin, who the Eagles have had some problems with. Debo, and then Noah Brown, Michael Gallup, and then Brian Robinson always seems, Zach Ertz. The Eagles, obviously, new safety, new corner. The matchup between the secondary and then the totality of what Washington now has. Because last year, you had McLaurin, you didn't have Debo, you had Noah Brown kind of as the, cosplaying as a number 2. They also have Luke McCaffrey in there as well. So when you look at the entire secondary and now the totality of what they bring to the table.
Yeah, I definitely think that they're more balanced and deeper. McCaffrey's a 3rd-round pick, so they got to find out in year 2 if he can add a little bit of pizzazz to that offense. And the same thing with their tight end, Ben Sinnott, who they drafted in the 2nd round last year, who did not make much of an impact. And if he doesn't make an impact this year, a much far greater impact, then it's going to look like a bad pick. So those are 2 guys that can probably help you. Again, not necessarily explosive players, but can at least help you move the chains. There's nothing wrong with being, and the Eagles have been this before too, right? You look at the 2017 Super Bowl team, that was not an explosive team. That was run the ball with LeGarrette Blount and Jay Ajayi and throw the ball to Ertz and Alshon Jeffrey. And every once in a while, you'd get a big play downfield with Aguilar or Jeffrey, but they were a ball control time of possession team. And that's why they were able, with that offensive line. And that seems to me where the Commanders are headed, except they do have an explosive element with their quarterback, and he can make that happen the way Carson Wentz did in 2017. So there might be some similarities there.
By the way, the Eagles and the NFL made it official today. Sunday, we will be officially 1 month away from Eagles training camp opening. The Eagles will open camp on July 22nd, and they will have a joint practice against the Browns on August 13th. So Sunday, the Phillies will play the Mets on Sunday Night Baseball right here on 97.3 ESPN. And the official countdown 1 month to training camp will be on. Geoff Mosher, are you excited? Are you ready?
I'm just can't wait, Mike. As in the words of the immortal Bart Scott, I can't wait.
Can't wait.
Sunday, we're going to go from having Seattle-like weather all spring long to South Florida weather as we just completely skip spring altogether. Right?
All right, Pro Football Focus, Moshe, put out the NFL's best duos at every position.
Okay.
The Eagles had the best duo at 3 separate positions. Which ones do you think they were?
The best duo. Now, how does that work with offensive line? Like best tackles?
The best tackle combination, the best guard combination. I guess they didn't do center.
Okay, so I'm going to go best.
Yeah, best tight end, the best running back. 2 at each of those positions.
I'm going to, if not offensive tackles, then I don't know what would be. So I would go offensive tackle.
Offensive tackle, Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson, they were the best tackle combination. That's 1.
All right.
Mailata, by the way, had a 95 overall PFF grade. Lane Johnson, an 88.
Nice. I'm going to go, even with sort of an unknown on Moro Ojomo, I'm going to say that the Jalen Carter just is so great that whoever you're putting next to him with is going to give you the number 1 DT combo there. So
that is correct.
Carter,
although it was Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis is the interior defensive line. They believe Carter and Davis are the best duo in the league. Are you surprised by that?
No, not at all. not one slight bit.
Carter, by the way, was 18th on the list at 73. Which is kind of surprising that he fell that low on their grading scale, yet is as dominant as he is.
Right. Now, the third one is tricky. I mean, I feel like the low-hanging fruit is A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, but I personally think there are some better duos in the league than that, but I'm not the one doing this poll. And every other position I'm thinking of with 2 players at it, linebacker, safety, corner, we don't really know who the number 2 is going to be yet. So I don't want to take the low-hanging fruit. Even guard, we don't exactly know Tyler Steen's going to be the right guard. I'm going to go guard. I'm going to say that they're just assuming Steen and Dickerson's going to be the best guard combination in the league. Is that it?
It is not guard. The guard combinations, by the way, the top 2, according to Pro Football Focus, entering this season, the 2 tackles were the Eagles. The 2 guards were the Chicago Bears in the NFC. Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson. So this is a team that went from, and this is a good conversation because this is an NFC team that now with 2 offensive linemen, do they have enough, because we thought the Bears could be sneaky last year because of their skill players, but their line was horrendous. Now, do they have the offensive line to help them make that jump? Could they be the Commanders of last year?
Yeah, no, certainly. I know that's the hot item, the hot prediction going into the year. To me, they're still the Bears until proven otherwise. But we'll see. So all right. Was it A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith? I can't
it is not wide receiver. The wide receivers were the Cincinnati duo.
All right.
Chase and Higgins.
All right, let me ask you this. Are they assuming full health for Nakobe Dean and going with Dean and Zach Baun? That's the only reason I didn't say it.
Zach Baun and Nakobe Dean were the best duo at linebacker, so I'm glad it kind of took us here. Yeah. Last year at this time, we were saying they had the weakest linebacking core in the league, and now they're saying they have the best duo in all of football. Is that too aggressive? If Dean is healthy, do you think and by the way, Dean being healthy, even if he is healthy, there's no guarantee that he's nearly the player that he was with that injury. That's a lot.
Yeah, I'll say this, and I'll try not to be evasive. I'll try to put my neck out there. Last year, Baun and Dean played like the best combination, and I don't think it's close. I really don't think it's close. I think that's how great both of them played. In fact, Cliff Kingsbury said before the Super Bowl in an interview, I think on radio at Media Row, that the Eagles had the most elite spacing on defense that he had ever seen in his life. And, spacing really refers to your back end and how you're playing that interior level between your nickel with DeJean and your two linebackers. And I think he was right, by the way.
Yeah.
They played. Now, what I will say is you've got a very small sample size on Bond playing at this level. And, while we all hope that he comes back and play, the Eagles fans hope that he plays at that level, that's going to be really difficult for a guy to replicate. I'm not saying he's a one-year wonder, but with all eyes on him and having to repeat that with a lot of new guys around him on defense, I'm not sure that's going to be real easy. So I don't know that they'll go into – I don't know that by week 10 we'll be having this conversation that the Eagles have the best inside linebacker duo in the NFL, but they absolutely were last year, and I don't think it was close.
All right, Geoff Mosher and Adam Kaplan on the latest ITB. Got a chance to catch up with Eagles tight end Dallas Goedert. And, let's get your thoughts on what Goddard thinks about the evolution of this offense this year. Does he look at this offense as, something that's got more layers to it than we've seen before?
Yeah, there's no question in our conversation with Dallas that 2023 is on the minds of the Eagles offense, and that's the epic collapse and especially the stale offense, as Nick Sirianni called it, because they just did a poor job of expanding their concepts, freshening their concepts. That's what led to the firings and the hiring of Kellen Moore and Nussmeier and et cetera, et cetera. So there's no question that Dallas was saying that it's good to have Kevin Patullo, who's been here through all the coordinators, knows this offense like the back of his hand, and was not only there for the highest of the high, but also the collapse. So he has a good understanding of saying, hey, we know what we do well. We need to continue to do what we do well, but we also can't get stale. We have to freshen up certain concepts.
Which is something they thought happened to them in 2023. They thought they got stale.
That was my point. Yes, that is on their minds, that they cannot let that happen again, that they can't just line it up with all the talent that they have and think we'll just do everything we did last year, add a little bit here, add a little bit there and win games. No, they will at times not necessarily reinvent the wheel or redefine themselves, but they will have to be a different iteration. That's the word Jalen Hurts used a lot, of themselves this year.
All right, check out that full conversation with Dallas Goedert on the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can get on all podcasting platforms. Just search Inside the Birds. And, of course, on Football at 4 here today. Good conversation with Geoff Mosher. We're going to be 1 week away from Eagles training camp the next time we talk to you, friend.
1 month away.
1 month away. 1 month away.
Don't make me jump through this microphone and scream and strangle you for saying
Sorry.
You scared me.
All right, we'll catch up with Mosher on Monday. Thanks, man. It's a Mosher Monday mailbag edition here on Monday.
Take care.
All right, there's Geoff Mosher, everybody, from the Inside the Birds podcast. ITB, the guys, of course, do a great job over at InsideTheBirds.com.